Distinguished guests, good day, welcome. As usual, I would like to thank for the previous fantastic two presentations, Mr. Veysel and Uğur. We are glad to have you. Hopefully, in my given time, I will be talking you through the topics by living up to the previous two presentations. Even though the Green Deal is the topic of our presentation, the Green Deal and its impact on our steel sector, I would like to tackle the topic from different perspectives. Our actual topic is the decarbonization and its impact on the transformation of our steel sector. I am going to be uttering certain speculative statements. Some could be really rigid. I just want to increase the awareness. That is going to be my ultimate purpose. Well, this Green Deal, first of all, I would like to define it with a couple of slides. Onwards, I will be talking about the situation of the steel sector in Turkey and what needs during this transformation period and what needs to be done. I will be talking you through my ideas. European Union was the first continent and European that aims at fulfilling the Paris 2015 targets. And in this respect, the Green Deal serves for this very purpose. This extensive study does not only define the business rules of the European Union and all other countries that have a trade relationship with the European Union. And in this respect, a carbon border adjustment mechanism was taken into consideration, which also considers our country as well, especially its aspect related with exports, because approximately 45 to 55% of our steel exports is done to the European Union, and the decisions adopted by the European Union is going to impact our trade between the two countries. And the Green Deal in order to ensure the Green Deal, European Union has developed certain instruments. One is namely the carbon tax. All activities which do have a carbon emission, they will be levied a tax based on the surpluses of emission that they release. And these surpluses will be calculated based on the thresholds defined. Polluter pays is going to be the principle, and the fund generated thanks to carbon credit is going to be used in order to for the decarbonization. And major funds are used in order to support this transformation. European Union carbon tax and carbon credit are going to be the fundamentals of the trade that is enacted between the European Union and its various countries. And a similar practice has also been initiated back in China. In Turkey, compliance activities are taking place. It is known that by the end of the year, the Ministry of Environment is going to make an announcement on the carbon credit. Another instrument is carbon taxing. The other instrument is the carbon credit. The regulating central authority audits whether activities do release emissions. And if there is a negative emission rate, it has to be documented. And on various prices, these documents could be traded on the market, bought and sold. Carbon credit is important in order to increase awareness in regards to decarbonization. Different countries have had different practices in that sense. Emission quantity is going to be defined by accredited institutions, and it is going to be valid for a certain period of time. And there is going to be non-fee carbon certificates, and carbon certificates are going to be the determining factors of this very market. The carbon credits, it is 70 euros per ton in the European Union, and in China it is $10 per ton. And market magnitude is $268 billion by 2050. Its magnitude is estimated to reach $22 trillion. and it encompasses 21.5% of the overall carbon market. And the carbon credit that is going to be purchased from the market should be documented, be submitted to the central authority, and the carbon credit is going to be deducted from the carbon tax, which is calculated by the respective ministry. It is going to be an instrument that is going to promote countries becoming carbon neutral. Carbon neutral is also equivalent to being net zero. And carbon border adjustment management, when it comes to timing and quantity, it is a sort of import tax which urges countries who resist transformation. Carbon border adjustment tax has served its purpose and has urged countries to take certain actions in order to decarbonize themselves. If within a country, especially from carbon market's point of view, it is important. If a country has established a carbon emission trade system based on the rules of the Green Deal and has levied a carbon emission tax, the tax paid within the country is going to be deducted from the exports that they will do to the European Union. Establishing a tax payment mechanism within the country is going to be more viable. 2023 to 26 is going to be the registration period, and as of 2026, carbon tax adjustment at border is going to become operational, and carbon tax loan and carbon tax adjustment at border are disputable topics which are still under discussion. We are not here to discuss these, but the ultimate target is to become net zero by 2050 when it comes to carbon emissions. So Paris 2015 agreement has specified certain emission reduction concerning various countries. European Union countries are implementing certain actions in this respect. Practices do differ from country to country. 2030 and 2050 are two critical dates. The ultimate target is 2050. For Turkey, it is 2053. For China, it is 2060. For India, it is 2070. To have an industrial and social level, which is net carbon zero. And during this period, in 2030, the carbon emission reduction is targeted to be around about 50 to 55% when we take 1990 as a baseline. The graphic, the line on the top, which is the red line, indicates where the world will head to if we do nothing. So if we do not take any actions by 2100, the temperature will increase by 5 degrees. If we do business as usual, the current trend, which is, certain actions to be taken, the temperature will increase by 3.5%. degrees. But if we take the necessary actions, it will be much lower and remain below 1.5 degrees. But of course, carrying out these activities is really challenging. On the left side, we see the baseline by 2020, which is our historic trend. The one indicated in black is the activities that we have to do in order to remain below 1.5 degrees. And the other one is, the other line is achieving 2 degrees by 2070. So how will this transformation take place? How will the humankind carry out these activities to remain within those limits? This slide shows the atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration indicated as ppm. It is the ppm change in the atmosphere. And since 380, I have been actually following it. Kyoto's target was to reduce 380 to 350. However, on the contrary, in November 2021, it shot up to 415. On a year-on-year basis, there is a 2 ppm increase, as you see, because in November 2020, it was 412. 450 is an irreversible level, which leads us to a totally different world. If this forecast is correct, there is only 17 years ahead in order to reach to the 450 ppm level. So how should we ensure the Green Deal, all sorts of transformation activities should not only be carried out in order to evade the cost when trading with the European Union, but it should be based on our very belief that we have to protect our own world. 15 out of 20 the G20 countries do have similar targets concerning the targets indicated in the Green Deal of the European Union. The cost of being late in transformation would actually put us in a difficult position to bear the climate change results, and it would also have a high cost on every sector. Our topic is decarbonization in this sense, which is the most important topic of the world. It should not only be limited to the Green Deal and the European Union practices. The actual topic is that the whole world and our country should become decarbonized. What we call it as Green Deal, especially after 2030, because of unprevented global issues, this Green Deal would turn into a green sanction. Climate change combat post 2030 is going to be totally different, and people become more panicked, and we will see humanity tragedies if actions are not taken properly. And tax adjustments at carbon border is only an option, which is really mild in a sense. If certain actions are not taken after 2030, we need harsher arrangements. And countries and companies who do not live up to the targets cannot enjoy these credits, and they cannot enjoy being in the international trade realm. So in this respect, countries that transform faster because of the cost of this transformation will not be able to appreciate the slow motion appreciation of the other less developed countries, because they have to bear a high cost of this fast transformation. Well, all trade, industrial, social, and financial world should be redesigned for decarbonization. In order to manage this process, we need awareness, time, and capital accumulation. These are the three main factors that not all countries enjoy. First of all, in order to access external funding resources, we should take actions And by 2030, we should be reducing our greenhouse gases by 50%. And in this respect, we have to exhaust the necessary means. The most important thing is to be able to finance our decarbonization transformation. We only witnessed certain European Union funds, certain grants and loans that are provided by the Commission, but it is an indication that the huge transformation necessities are not understood well. We need a fund mechanism which is really clear, both legally and in content. Since 2005, in the European Union, emission trading is implemented. We have to use it more effectively. Both European Union countries and other countries who are not aware or else who do not practice these taxes or as this kind of trade should actually consider how to finance their transformation processes. And knowledge-based transformation should be financed, it should be transparent, it should have a clear legal structure. In the previous presentations, it was also mentioned that 70% of our steel production being based on scrap. Is this an advantage? Yes, it is indeed. It serves a great advantage. However, yes, being a scrap-based is advantageous, but it doesn't actually mean that our problem is minor. Even though we would be scrap-based, our problem is really major, and decarbonization in our sector is really challenging. World's average emission is 1.6 to 1.8 tons of carbon dioxide per ton of steel. Ours is below 1. If we say that, we would be misleading because the scrap and ore usage distribution is 50-50, excluding China. Our issue here is not to have less emissions compared to China and the rest of the world, but it is to have higher emissions, which is compared to the thresholds which are indicated for carbon taxing. It's impossible for us to know the emission levels of the businesses. Both high furnace is a literature figure. Probably the facilities in Turkey do have the same numbers. For each ton of steel, facilities emit 1,800 to 2,500 kg of carbon dioxide, which is scope 1 and 2. Scope 1 in the steel manufacturing process is the process-generated emissions, and scope 2 is the electricity energy, the power that we purchase for our facilities. And scope 3 is the emissions generated from logistics and external resources. Just to make a comparison and to show the situation that we are in, I want to talk you through these. High furnaces, and for both, the total emission is approximately 1,800 to 2,500 kg per ton. Scope 1 and 2, if 100% scrap is used, it is 500 to 600 kg per ton. It involves scope 1 and 2 most probably. And you say probably, it's most probably. How can a scientific knowledge be most probably? Unfortunately, clarity is really less in this area. Another topic which is really debatable is the AIFs. 80% height or as cold DRI used. And if 20% of scrap is used, which is one of the typical solutions, the number is 1,100 to 1,200 kg per ton of steel, including scope 1 and 2. And DRI, I'm going to more elaborate on it later on. Nucor is one of the other important references. Its scope 1 and 2 emissions is 470 per ton. And by 2030, we have pledged to reduce it by 30%, by the way. So what about the EIF solution in Turkey? This is based on my estimation because since 2017, the greenhouse emissions verification process is being managed by Turkey. Accredited institutions do analyze the greenhouse gases of facilities and record it. And based on this calculation method, as far as I know, in Turkey, one of the best EIFs of a facility in Turkey, I try to model it, and this facility for scope 1 emits 370 kg of carbon dioxide per ton, which is from scrap to the finished good. For nerve sticks, and I do estimate that this is 370 to 450. Of course, each facility has got a different number. This is important because this enables us to compare our processes with the rest of the world. Our problem is that compared to other integrated facilities, the EIF solution problem is a milder problem, but eventually it is a problem at the end of the day. And what should the public sector do was a question, actually. What the public sector needs to do is, first of all, this EIF, the scope 2 emission level, I mean, them using electricity, and based on the electricity manufacturing profile in Turkey, the emission is between 325 to 450, which means the steel sector's emission is equivalent to electricity power consumption emission. So there is this huge emission problem that Turkey faces in this respect. Nucor is 470. I mean, Nucor is going to try reducing 470, but we have to start reducing this emission numbers as of 700 kg. And scope 1 is the topic that manufacturers have to focus on. But scope 2 is the actual problem of the whole country, which the public sector should also focus on. And so again, it is going to be technical data, but I have to talk you through that because we don't have many figures and numbers in this respect. Scope 1 emissions, this is the distribution of it. This graphic I particularly presented so as to find out what we have to concentrate on, because as I said, yes, we have a milder problem, but it still exists. In order to cut down on our problem, the level of our problem, what should we do? This is an exemplary facility. Approximately 48% of the emission is derived from the scrap, the carbon inside the scrap. And 27% of it is related to the natural gas that is emitted by the whole process, and 22% is derived from carbon itself. Others are minors. And there isn't much of a difference between facilities in that sense. Well, this actually shows us or as the metallurgy experts, in what we have to concentrate on in an EAF facility. Well, yes, yes, it is true that we have to more focus on scrap in order to decarbonize the very sector, but here melting is really important. This is an important concept, which brings us to an important concept in the steel sector, which is efficiency, both metallic efficiency and energy efficiency. In terms of metallic efficiency, well, I think a bit differently from the mainstream. I do believe that different values are possible, are taboos, and the lines, the borders in our mindset should be questioned, because no matter what, 50% emissions that is derived from the process, approximately 50% of it is derived from scrap, and scrap efficiency is really important in that sense. From scrap to liquid steel until all the way to the finished good, we have to cut down on the waste, the scrap, which is going to directly reduce the emission. This is not a technological investment. Only metallurgists, operators should adopt a different understanding and take actions within their facility. And scope 1 emissions, the most important one is derived from the scrap, as you see. And scrap is a recyclable steel. That's why there is no chance of it to be of a less carbon. But with different raw materials, of course, we can achieve lower carbon dioxide levels. And it is possible to reduce the EAF emissions. But the problem so that the metallurgists have to deal with are these. We have to increase the melting efficiency of scrap in those facilities. The current melting efficiency should definitely be questioned. Specific consumption cost, another concept should be added to all that list, which is the emission level of your processes. This is a reality. Classical EIF, this requires a paradigm shift, and we need a higher metallurgic efficiency. We need higher energy efficiency, and thus we have to reduce our emissions, and we have to redesign our processes in that sense. Another important topic when talking about scrap in EAFs is the chemical energy usage, which is going to become disputable in the future. It is just started to be discussed. However, as far as I see, the steel sector is not discussing this sufficiently. In the scrap usage, instead of the melting technology and process used are important. These processes should be non-fossil fuel based. All current technologies should be questioned in that respect. Chemical energy packages are disputable. Chemical energy usage, its very purpose is to consume less electricity and to achieve faster production, but it emits such an emission which cannot be accepted because even in Turkey, electricity energy production is really high, but chemical energy used would be even higher. So in brief, the chemical energy usage emission should be taken into account, should be recalculated, and the processes of EIF, which include carbon melting, boiling, and slag, should all be taken into account. And high chimney emissions recovery is not correct because the emission balance should also be included in the calculation of energy balance. And the new investments do not take into account the emission balance, which shows the lack of awareness in our country in that respect. I don't think that new investments do not actually consider emissions. There is no carbon tax. This emission does not have a financial cost. And when it comes to EIF investments, different processes have not been well developed. So these new investments, unfortunately, because they do not consider the necessary aspects, its costs will be huge in the future. Hydrogen usage, BRI and DRI manufactured based on when used hydrogen is the most important alternative that we encounter. High furnace is not the only way steel ore can be used, and the DRI manufacturing facilities, instead of natural gas and carbon, they could be operated on hydrogen, and in electrical furnaces, they could be converted. This is the most important popular idea, but hydrogen is offered as a miracle solution. But this is wrong, because trials are still at their early stages, and because of high electricity usage, hydrogen, which is not manufactured based on renewable energy, cannot be a solution. Fossil fuel elimination is the most important technical problem, and the steel ore is an important emission source. From excavation from the nature all the way to its processing. Decarbonization and liquid steel processes, unfortunately, do emit a lot of emissions. It is the most problematic metallurgic process. The current technological infrastructure, adapting to partial hydrogen usage and eliminating fossil fuels partially, enjoys huge studies, but still there isn't a study which proves their efficacy. Scope to electricity manufacturing, its impact on our emission is a problem unique to us. These data were obtained from the European Environmental Agency. These are updated data. As per the 2020 data, France electricity manufacturing only emits 51 grams of carbon dioxide per kilowatt hour. For Sweden, it is 9, Spain 156, Germany 311, Canada 160, Europe average 230, world's average 630, the G20 632, Turkey is 543. So within the scope of the Green Deal, Turkey, despite will enjoy steel manufacturing based on scrap, the biggest problem that Turkey will encounter is this high emission rate of that is generated from electricity production. So as long as this emission rate does not change, it will have really high costs. And just to give an idea, for each ton of steel, it would say 0.5 in the EIF. So 500 tons of emission you have to pay for each if you export, and it is 70 euro per ton. So if we do not change and transform as a country, and if this profile does not change, transform, then this money would either be paid as a form of carbon tax within our country, or else it would be paid into the European Union's pocket at the borders. So the electricity generation is the most important problem in terms of emissions. Let me just skip this slide. By the way, the respiratory diseases in countries and yearly mortalities and emission rates do have a parallel and direct connection. This is a striking reality which I in person follow when it comes to pulmonary diseases and air pollution mortalities and electricity production emission rates connections is really striking. 78 million people do lose their lives because of PM 2.5 pollution, which is due to fossil fuel consumption. Up till yesterday, there are low quality lignates. We were arguing that we were going to generate value and we were establishing thermic power plants. Still, we have coal-based thermic power plant investments going on in Turkey. So where is the world heading to? It's really specific, explicit. The world is trying to lead to a carbon neutral world, which doesn't have any fossil fuels used. But from carbon, I mean, by 2030, we still haven't drafted our strategy to exit coal usage. We've just recently undersigned Paris 2015. Our raw material, 70% of it is important by our country, which exacerbates the logistics problem. Coal or scrap, we have to import it by 70%. And the emission concerning logistics, which falls into the scope of scope 3, is another important factor that we have to tackle. The whole manufacturing chain should be decarbonized, and this transformation is not going to be easy at all. The steel manufacturers are held responsible for scope 1, and they will also be impacted by scope 2 and scope 3, and they will have to take actions in order to decarbonize their manufacturing chain, their supply chain, in order to comply with scope 2 and scope 3, which is going to be an extra cost. The incoming scrap from the United States and outgoing product to the United States, all that emission, not maybe today, not tomorrow, but within a certain period of time, is going to be added to our emission profile. For that reason, we have to emergently develop low emission solutions, high furnace. I mean, we do 30% of our production, and they are responsible for the emissions, and they have to be decarbonized. And in this respect, high furnace of 2.5 tons, 1.8 to 2.5 tons of carbon dioxide per ton emission level, and 18 to 24 gigajoule per ton energy consumption is really difficult. So in this respect, the most important thing will be to transform the high furnace and BOFs. This is a short graphic that talks us through different processes, emissions. From ore to finished goods, high iron making, it has the highest emissions, as you see. International Energy Agency states that 70 billion US dollars value of high furnace and BOF is going to be out of operation. So the world steel aging sector do consider abandoning them at once. Facilities in China, Canada, Belgium are the ones who are thinking of abandoning these facilities. So Bark, brand new EIF, hydrogen, DRR facilities, they are actually now have started implementing them in their countries. The ones who will not actually abandon these facilities, they will have to focus on technologies of carbon capturing and storing. So due to their carbon load, our facilities in our country, which is both the carbon load within our country and out of our country, has to be transformed. And this is with an extraordinary cost for the ones, if it is feasible, if they are not going to abandon the high furnace and BOFs, they have to consider the solution of the carbon capturing and storing according to the International Energy Agency's report, which has been issued 2 months ago. Due to emissions, approximately $70 billion of integrated facility is going to be out of order earlier than estimated. And according to Ale Cerro, the decarbonization is going to amount up to 1 trillion for the steel sector. So how are we going to transform ourselves the 1.5 centigrade degrees of level?
So we are at 1.1 and it shall be limited to 1.5 and it will be actually on 2040. It is something inevitable. It cannot be prevented. So the purpose here is to just keep it under 2. Another important thing is the high process birth, and this is actually is creating a situation because the countries such as China and India used to just produce it at around 129 million ton, but in 2015 it was produced as 914 million ton. So we have the fossil-based high furnace route, and it is caused by the activities of China and India. While we have 30% of mine power, and also it is 52% in the EU, and also in China the situation is 90%. I'd like to share my opinion about China. Well, is there an expectation of aggressiveness from China? They probably are going to ask this. This question. As far as I see and observe in China, a paradigm has shifted and changed. Current technological investment in decarbonization and the carbon neutral targets cannot be reached by China, and China is aware of this. Just one of the ways of actually obtaining it, including the technological investment, it also can be enabled if the production levels go down. High emission cost, high productions, high cost of carbon no longer can be actually produced by China or up to by China. So probably it will just lead the China to import such materials. While in 1995, 5% of the global emission was caused by the steel industry, but in 2015 that was 7.7. So we understand that steel has direct impact on global emission. So how we actually came up with this situation? Because in the last 115 years, 45 gigaton steel actually created 90% of emission, and it was caused by the BOF route, and also the scrap usage of 45 million tons that had happened in 1950 as well increased the usage of the steel. We see shifts as well in between the years. So even increasing demand for scrap well, rationally just cause the decline of the usage. So up until 2035, probably this level won't exceed 35%, and the increasing cost probably will be reflected on the prices. But the demand for the decarbonization is more, so probably it will increase the protectiveness, and as well it will increase the prices, and this is the biggest risk in front of Turkish steel sector. Classic producers, their share has dropped from 83% to 43%, and for the new producers, the increase just was caused by the buff process. It is quite clear that, well, this is not only my opinion, but this is what the scientific studies say. By the way, such studies, I can maybe share one of my favorite link that I would recommend you to read as well. This article, it is called Life Cycle Assessment. So, steel sector's relationship with the environment is very clearly pictured actually in this article. I recommend you to read it. The most important emission source is high furnaces, and their average age is 13 years. It's quite striking, I believe, because we know that a high furnace can work without aligning for 20 or 30 years, but the current average is 13 years, and high furnaces are being commissioned recently even. And climate change commitments. Just to actually implement these commitments, while China, which is the country that has the highest furnace capacity, and but not having the highest emission, because America and the EU have higher emissions. So we understand that China's high furnace capacity, within 15 years, probably 170 million tons will be early retired up until 2050. Almost 50% of these furnaces will cut out of service up until 2050. If China is honest with their target of carbon neutralization, China will have to shut down all these facilities, furnaces. Of course, we need to think ourselves in that regard. According to the evaluations of 2018, global capacity surplus was 500 million tons. So we need a new regulation of a capacity. So either these facilities should be shut down, or they need to be evaluated, because just continuing with this capacity and the surplus of the capacity do not seem really that possible for the near future. So this graphic shows a general subjective and speculative evaluation, because no one can really know the exact capacity of the countries, or can really force the country to have a certain capacity. So the most important ones in terms of overcapacity are China, India, Japan, United States, Russia, South Korea. Well, overcapacity would mean a problem of the sources, limited actually resource usage, and overcapacity. These two are would mean a huge problem, and it requires an important transformation. Decarbonization obligation, of course, lies in the fact that all countries should really transform radically, and companies should seek for sustainability. It's not enough only if the companies become sustainable, but countries, people, they also should be sustainable. It requires actually an important awareness and education, but it would probably create some tensions in between the countries, and we should be prepared for that. The question is not what others do, but the question is, what should we do? Awareness, time, and finances. These are the parts that we are lacking a little bit behind. So anything that we are planning to do should be spent for the transformation of the emission. And of course, it's really important to underline the importance of the recyclable energy sources, and renewable energy sources as well are quite important. I would say that arc of furnaces require as well the transformation of mentality. We cannot really reach up to the zero carbon. The scrap, of course, would contain carbon and it might cause carbon emissions. So, in terms of the future of the recycling, there are like two primary elements, which are the steel and scrap. So even the liquid actually project which is developed in America right now that is aiming at the elimination of the fossil, and it is different than the other processes. It is zero emission project, but you need to just put a little bit of the carbon. Even in this very new process, it contains a certain level of carbon, and it is called the liquid oxidate electrolysis project. I think independent of the type of the raw material, the processes can as well define the level of the carbon emission. I think both route, of course, uses a really enlarged carbon emission range, and one of the reason is the differences in between the technologies and the processes. In the process of steel production and manufacturing, I think the most important, I believe, prevention is just focusing on energy efficiency and recycling projects. We need to really focus on this issue, and the carbon emission issue as well shall be handled by the processors, not only the environment engineers should look at this issue, but the processors also should be in charge of that. The problem and the solution. I think you are the solution because it's possible to consume less, and low emission is technically also is possible, but we just need to shift our mentality, and this mentality should bring different preferences. So that's why steel sector has an important task. Well, instead of I think some claims, we need to just take actions, real actions, and implement them. I think that carbon capture and storage would be very, very popular, especially they can be used for the BOF and natural gas DRI. Well, it actually exists in two places. One of them is in Emirate Steel, and the other one is located in Tata Steel in India. These two systems are also quite promising. So in steel actually production, no matter which process is implemented, while zero carbon emission is not possible. So that's why carbon capture and storage lies in the future technologies. Carbon capture technology, all the developments related to this is now summarized on this graphic right now. It is really, really low, of course, but in the future in 2050, it might reach up to 4.25 gigatons per year. So how should be the new paradigm? Efficiency and low emission should be the fundamentals of the metallurgical processes. Circular economy rules shall be applied in every step. So by saying circular economy, I also mean what? In the past, just to get scrap, we used to actually transform our cars into the scraps, and it has been turned out that that's not good for the circular economy. So we need no more consumption, we need less consumption, and we need long life shelf of the products, and we need more efficient processes. Renewable sources should be used for the electricity actually generation. and waste heat should be used for the electricity generation. Up until now, maybe it was not that feasible, but it is really feasible for now because the electric prices have increased sharply. We need a transparent and targeted carbon tax. It is a must, and we need to distribute it within the sector. So how this tax will be collected, to whom it will be given to and distributed to, mean a lot. And it should be different than what was done before. If we do not change our approach towards life, the life will force us to do so. Well, am I optimistic? Humanity and its performance up until now actually leaves me without hope. So I believe that we have to change our mentality and we have to really go for decarbonization. We are not looking for excuses because it's a must. So our country, unfortunately, is lagging behind in terms of transparency, governance, transparent fund management, and information and education level. While there's no other way than transforming and adapting ourselves into new changes. And I think the most important war of the humanity is just cooperating and collaborating. And I hope that we won't be alone in that battle. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mohammed, for this very beautiful and detailed presentation. Well, my apologies for the maybe like exaggerated details. My apologies for that. Well, I do not think in that way. All the details were quite important. Well, I have noticed. After 2030, you had just said that there would be more panic. I do not want to underestimate a pandemic. However, within the pandemic, well, what did we do? What type of preventions and measures we took? Maybe we need to just also elaborate on that, and the panic might intervene more after 2030, and we are left with 8 or 9 years. Maybe this is not enough. So how should we prepare ourselves before that date? Well, I'm sure that there will be a panic. I am not a fortune teller. However, this is what we see, this is what we observe, and this is what we also follow. So now we are like beyond the climate change. There will be also an immigration influx that is caused by the climate change, and it is going to be directly binded with this, and we already see the reactions of the countries as well towards the migration. So we have really limited time left. We're only trying to be part of discussions just because of taxes at the customs union. However, we have one advantage: the steel sector, is scrap-based, but it is not enough. So a steel sector that is producing millions and as well exporting. So it is like 70 euro on the border tax, and it shall be paid by the sector. Well, this is, by the way, just the current tax. Probably it will be higher afterwards. So when we have the domestic carbon tax, it will be harsher because we need now an emission trade system, and we need to increase the awareness as quick as possible. And the second thing is that everybody should know that the future does not contain hydrocarbon. Coal facilities, we need to give up on them, and we will have to give up on our natural sources. And this is what the public sector should do. I hope they can do. We are already late. This transformation is really quick. Maybe we will suffer, and I'm afraid of that. In the first session, there was a question from the Minister of Industry. Well, they asked what should do the public sector. So, what's the urgent measure, do you think? electric energy profile has a high emission level, so in the shortest level they should decrease it. At this cost, well, we will pay for it. Furthermore, all the world, all the structures are now transforming into decarbonization. We just hear these words very recently. However, it is the topic of the world in the maybe last few years. So we should really adopt ourselves into these changes as quick as possible. We are running out of time. We need to hurry up. Okay, any question for Muammer? Microphone, please. Onur Sever from BSR Purchasing Department. I have two questions. The first one is about the nuclear plants. Well, we have already talked about the coal plants, but as far as I know, France and Germany within the EU couldn't have a consensus about the nuclear plants and their classification as the green energy source. So while in Turkey we have a nuclear plant investment. So nuclear plants, would they be classified as the green energy or not? This is my first question. And second question is about the carbon capturing and stocking technologies. Well, I just heard it for the first time, and I just see here a great potential. However, the investment type, its feature, while if we cannot really decrease the release of the carbon, then what would happen? Would it be possible to decrease the carbon emission domestically? Could you please inform us a little bit more on that? Well, thank you. Nuclear energy. There are serious discussions if it would be classified as the green energy or not. But I think that if it is safe, well, by the way, it's not my expertise. Maybe I cannot really say for sure, but anything that is without carbon can be classified as green. But the safety and security of the nuclear is really, really important. France is 54, and as you may know, France has the lowest level of actually diseases in that regard. So, nuclear energy, of course, it is still debatable. While I am not an expert on that, but the country, which is France, that has the highest nuclear plant number, has the actually lowest numbers of the actually chest diseases. The other thing is about carbon capturing. I believe that yes, in the future, the most advantageous and the most easy to use type of technologies will be preferred. So carbon capturing and storing. Well, instead of changing the technology of a factory totally, maybe instead this technology can be used because it is a studied project, and there are optimistic ideas on carbon capturing and storing. So I think that this is really promising. I think that this can be preferred by the factories. Hello. Engin Arlar is my name. Thank you very much for enlightening presentation. And it's a little bit horrifying though. My question is about the practices. Since the revolution of industry, developed countries' carbon has been released in the world, and they are responsible of that. And China and India are just now emerging countries, and they need steel. And there is, I think, a social injustice here and a conflict. Aresra, you're talking about it just requires like 1 billion of investment. So when we think of the carbon taxes, would it be enough the financing of these projects? And if not, what would happen in 2030? Well, it's really difficult to estimate actually the climate wars, climate migrations. I don't want to really make speculations on that, but of course I am afraid, I'm scared, and it is possible because in India the sea level has risen. So people living in this region, they only need to migrate to the north. So there will be new routes of immigration, and also there will be drought in the northern part of the world. Yes, it is quite unjust. And the emission was created by the Western countries. Poor countries did not create it, but they will suffer it the most. So the EU somehow is honest and intellectual is in the EU and the marginals of the EU. We have to thank to them, because if they did not exist, we couldn't have been discussing even today this. So Africa as well will be damaged. It is the only continent. So the ones that are not prepared will suffer the most. So it's really important, this mentality change and transformation. While emission is caused by the households at 40%, the electricity that we use at home, they are quite insufficient. Hakan Bulgurlu made a presentation in COP26. So we have lost actually emission a lot. So how come people can change their air conditioning system at houses? People are hungry with the increasing heat. Well, southern part of Turkey, for example, they suffer of drought and they will suffer more. So it will increase the carbon footprint, water footprint. Well, for example, when we think of the elements, when we think of the ores, yes, it is inevitable that there is this footprint, as you know, that the dams just collapsed. So this is where the world leads to. So the element producers in China, yes, they are being oppressed and the prices are being oppressed. Overproduction, surplus of the production. Yes, we have to change this mentality. So we do not need actually consumption based on the production, but we need a total mentality change. The sea is over. Would it bring a war? If the EU just gives up being a leader, and the EU is quite conscious, by the way. And the USA, fortunately, Trump is no longer at the service, and their mentality has changed as well. So yes, the Western world has to pay for their responsibility of the past, and money is not enough for that. So transforming other societies wouldn't require only money, but also it just requires awareness, education. It is difficult. So I am pessimistic, unfortunately, about the future. I personally prefer to look at the actually empty side part of the glass. As steel producers, and I am the manager of a steel factory, I clearly see what we have to do. I see the potentials. I am aware of the fact that we have low awareness. So please forgive me saying that we have really, really serious problems. Thank you, Muammer, for your kind presentation. Yes, the topic is kind of disturbing, but your elaborations were quite meaningful and valuable. Thank you.